Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to our event, of course, and to my talk. So, my name is Jesse. I work for Evolving Web. I'm our WordPress practice lead as well as a solutions architect there. So I'm kind of involved in all the WordPress things at the company, all of our projects, including all the sort of, acting as like a tech lead on most of them, and don't often get into development work anymore, but still involved in a lot of those projects. So I'm talking today about kind of content editing experience and how we can improve that in the WordPress ecosystem. I want to start off by just kind of stating my theory, or maybe it's kind of like an opinion right off the bat, which is that I think we as an industry need to spend more time thinking about this for how we can make the websites easier for people to update, to maintain. Funny, last time I did this talk, a similar version of it, I also got an applause. I think it really resonated with people. I like that. I'm glad.
You should go out and drag people into this.
Well, I'm going to maybe take a slightly different approach to how I'm going to talk about this, but yeah, so that's ultimately kind of my take on this, my feeling about this. I do feel like there's nobody in a lot of organizations, including agencies, including ours, that really is sort of like seen as like a specialist in thinking about and making a good editing experience for our clients, for our users, for our content editors. So my hope by talking about this is to maybe trigger some more discussions, have some ideas, and just get people thinking about it and talking about it more. Before I get too much deeper into that, I like to sort of think about this scenario, and I think it's very apt right now because Thanksgiving, of course, is coming up, right? At least here in the U.S., we're kind of in between the Canadian and U.S. Thanksgiving, and so us in Canada, we've had our moment of this already. It's coming up here where it's like you go to see when a local business is open, a grocery store or a gas station or something, and you might pull it up on your phone and look at like Google Maps, and it's going to give you that warning that says like, oh, we don't really know if this is accurate because it's a holiday coming up. And you might go to like their website, and the website has normal business hours, doesn't really help you all that much. Apple Maps probably the same thing, all these different locations. What I found though is probably the best place to see this type of information is going to be social media, Instagram or something like that. They always post like a story or something about their opening hours for those holidays. I think it's just because it's so much easier, right? These walled gardens, these social media networks have made that so easy just to do a quick post. I think that's kind of where we're lacking in the web ecosystem. We don't make it all that easy to make these updates. So my theory is that websites are still too difficult to update, even though we've done a lot. We've progressed a lot into these new visual page builders and whatnot, but those walled gardens have still made that a lot easier. They've kind of they beat the open web in a certain sense. When editors can't do something simple as updating their opening hours on the website, then that's kind of it's clear that something's wrong there. And for us, we work with larger institutions that have 50 or 100 or even more content editors. So they can't all be trained on how to do some small, simple updates. So that's where it's really unfortunate that we haven't made it all that easy. I do think though that it doesn't have to be that way, and that's kind of the essence of my thought, my idea, my theory is that we as site builders, we can help. We can make it a lot easier for people to update their websites. That basically the infinite flexibility that we've given our users through modern page builders, that's kind of a part of the problem. We've given them so much flexibility, so much control, and ultimately we can improve this a lot by sort of curating that experience, by improving the block editor experience in WordPress. I want to talk a bit about WYSIWYG editors. This is kind of maybe the original WYSIWYG editor front page, Microsoft front page, if anyone remembers that. It really was a WYSIWYG, right? It really was what you see is what you get. And just in case some people didn't know that acronym, what you see is what you get is WYSIWYG. I'm probably going to say that a bunch of times, so I wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same playing field there. we have different kinds of things that we've called WYSIWYG over the years. We have text editors that, this might be a bit of a controversial statement, but I don't think that's actually a WYSIWYG editor. I don't think that this is really what you see is what you get. But we have those we had those in WordPress for a long time, and we still do. And we've had them in various other platforms as well. And then we have other like page building systems. I kind of consider these a bit more of a legacy page builder. Things like in WordPress we have advanced custom fields. Drupal, we have Drupal paragraphs. If anyone here here from the Drupal community, and Drupal layout builder is being replaced with something new and exciting. I think when we're using these tools as page builders, I see it just like HTML tables back in the day when we used those for layout as well. They're great tools. They have very specific purposes, but using them for page building, I think, is also not going to help our content editors. That was actually out of order. That was supposed to be after the other slide, but I think those tiny MCE editors, other editors, are kind of this like really difficult way. They're really not WYSIWYG editors. I just created this acronym just for the sake of it, but doesn't actually exist. So they're really just, you have to make your edits, you have to go to the front page and refresh and see how it looks. And it's not really a true WYSIWYG. What we do have now, I've alluded to this a few times, is these modern page builders in many areas of the web. We have them now in WordPress, the block editor and the new sort of full site editing experience. We're going to have it in Drupal with Drupal Canvas. We've also had it in other areas with other tools like Wix and Squarespace and Webflow. We've had it in WordPress for a while too with other tools like Elementor and Divi and Beaver Builder and all those other page building tools. These are all what I consider as real WYSIWYG editors. You really truly do get what you see as you're making edits to your content. But I want to focus more on the open source ones, the ones that are in core WordPress and core Drupal. These are probably the two of the these are the two that we have in core of these two projects. I think that's incredibly important that they're built into core because it means that it's open source. It means that we can curate them, we can customize them, we can change the experience as we need to. So let's dive in a little bit more into one of these, and this, of course, is the block editor. I hope I don't slip up and say Gutenberg too many times, but I probably will. There's a lot going on here. We have a whole set of embed options on the side here that are giving a lot of different blocks that you can use for embedding different kinds of media that you might not even use. We have a whole bunch of custom color options there. In fact, you can even specify a completely arbitrary color on your site. We have different controls for margins where you can adjust all the margins in every single block. So there's a lot of things that you can do that a content editor has to choose to do while they're making edits to their site. But if you curate it, and this is an example for a project that we worked on for UGA, I think Suzanne talked about it this morning. Some people have talked about it a couple of times from the University of Georgia, so I should expand the acronym. And so we can really curate that editing experience. We can reduce the options that are there and bring it down to only these few options, because we might not need to have controls like margin and colors, because we've built it all into the theme. We've made them a theme that has brand guidelines attached to it. It's accessible. It has everything that they need so that they don't need to worry about and make all these decisions. So it's a lot less options now, and it can just speed up the ability to make edits to a website. So ultimately, I think that we can do better. I think that we as an industry should strive to do a lot better, because this matters for our content editors for a number of reasons. But I don't think anybody is truly really advocating for it too much. I think in a lot of sites it's an afterthought. It needs somebody who's talking about it on the team. In terms of why does it matter? I mean, I've kind of mentioned a few things. Just the ability to make edits very quickly and easily, very efficiently. It also improves the ability to be compliant with your brand guidelines. most of our client projects have specific brand guidelines and specific color combinations and typography and whatnot. So exposing controls of your custom typography doesn't really make sense if it's going to go off-brand. And accessibility as well. There's an ability to basically create a really inaccessible block or section of a site if you can just choose your own arbitrary color combinations or text weights and whatnot. So, and ultimately, I feel like if we create a really easy way for our content teams to work, it'll create a better sentiment for the CMS. Too many people really hate using their CMS. We've heard this from various of our existing clients. They have all these problems. Their users, their content teams don't want to use it because it's just too complicated. So then information becomes outdated, and that's when you get back to the Thanksgiving problem. So I want to go through a few tips and tricks of how I think we can work on this. I'll talk through most of these in various ways. And I'm also going to have there'll be a few QR codes, but also I'll share some links to some resources later as well. So no worries about capturing everything. But the gist of it is, I think if we embrace the real-time previews in these modern tools, in the case of WordPress, we're really wanting to adapt the theme JSON file, which is basically a theme configuration file that gives you your color combinations, your typography, and whatnot. And that's kind of the modern way to build themes in WordPress. Reducing those controls, as I showed, like curating that experience a lot. WordPress has a few other capabilities, like creating style presets, which allows you to easily toggle between, say, a light mode and a dark mode of a component specifically, without having to adjust every single block underneath it. That's actually sections files, not style presets. Style presets is just creating, like, a common thing is we want to have an H2 on a site have a sort of a different size, because maybe it's visually it should have a different size, but in terms of accessibility and hierarchy, it needs to be an H2. We can create a style preset that allows us to control that size without having to allow the editor to actually choose the right font size. Just a one-click button, and it'll set that up for them. We can customize the experience per user role as well. I'll show a little bit more of these next couple of things in a moment, like disabling some of the undesirable features, simplifying that block toolbar as I showed, and what I don't get into too much here and happy to talk about more is creating native custom blocks. There's a bunch of tools out there that help you create custom blocks that in WordPress that kind of create a very difficult experience as well. So I won't go too much into that one because I think it's another talk on its own. But exploring native custom blocks in React is going to get you the best experience. So if I go back to our WordPress editor here, the block editor, it is truly a WYSIWYG editor. You're truly editing what you see, and especially now with the full site editing, site editor sort of components. And yeah, so this is our real-time preview. We don't need to have that that funny acronym of making a change in your content and having to go refresh your page to see how that looks in the end. Sorry, actually, I'm going to talk a bit about embracing this more, embracing these modern tools, embracing the block editor specifically. We built websites before where we use these sort of large field-based systems, and this is sort of using like ACF, which is kind of similar to Drupal paragraphs. It's sort of an intermediary tool where we build these blocks that are based around fields. It helps us to bridge the gap between sort of the old classic way of building WordPress themes where we use a lot of custom fields, but also, as you can see here, this isn't the WYSIWYG experience. This is a bunch of fields that we have to configure, and that's going to go back to that, having to save your page and go back out and reload your page again to see what it looks like in the end. It feels really foreign when you start to get used to the true WordPress block editor experience, and it doesn't really integrate well with the whole rest of the experience, with those custom colors that we can get with everything else. It's quite easy to build these though, and that's why we end up using them, because we can use simple tools that we're already used to. All done in PHP, no need to learn something new. But in reality, the actual the code here isn't really important. It's more so just showing we can very easily create a native Gutenberg block that does the same thing, and it's worth taking the time to learn that for the developers. But the big thing that I really want to talk about is actually how to curate the editor experience. I've mentioned that kind of a few times, reducing some of the options that are available. So I want to come back to this example. WordPress provides a ton of things by default. It is, a framework. It's a tool that we use to build sites. But it is confusing. There are so many options here, like that huge list of blocks again that are things that we're probably not even using on this website. There's even the ability, if you search for a block, to install new blocks, just right there in the editing experience. If you have the permissions to do that. So again, you sort of have this infinite blocks, infinite flexibility, but infinite complexity as well. WordPress also has a set of default patterns that are available, so you can insert these on almost any WordPress site that's using the block editor. These probably won't fit into most of our branding. It's kind of it wouldn't look great on most of our sites because it's not tailored to meet our site. And again, with great power comes great responsibility, right? We have the ability to create these horribly inaccessible colors with this custom color combinations.
What are you talking about? That's great.
Yeah, perfectly readable, especially from this angle. I think. Yeah. So it's just there's some bad spacing. There's bad text colors, inconsistent with the brand guidelines, and not fully accessible. So just all around, not a great set of options there that we probably don't need to expose to everybody. We do sometimes still want to have these very structured content types that gives us the ability to have very specific controls and whatnot. I don't mean to say that that's never the case, and those can still be available, of course. And components like this with many fields, we can do all these things still, but we still need to find a middle ground. I think our editors are starting to expect a lot more from us when we're creating these experiences. So if I go back now again to this example of we have all these options in the sidebar, not unlike those the structured content types, we can start to actually remove a bunch of these things to make it simpler to edit the pages. And so that we take something like this that has all these different options. I bring it down to something like this. So I showed this one earlier just to sort of show that before and after how that looks. We can also do this on a per role level. So say certain roles, maybe the administrator should have different options versus a designer or a content editor. We have a lot of control to be able to customize that. And so here again, as I said, these code samples are available if you wanted to grab it. I'll have all the links at the end as well. But this is sort of the single way to disable some of those controls through your theme configuration file. Just setting a few things, and all of a sudden you remove some of that control. We can disable that huge list of patterns that I showed that really don't fit in with our brand guidelines. We can disable those also through some very simple code snippets that can be put in a plugin or in a theme somewhere. And here's where we can also enable some other additional settings. And this is even doing it by role. So again, as I mentioned, you might want to have somewhere where an editor on a site has these options. Then a designer will have a couple more options because we're going to trust them to be able to make the decision about the text color and the background color because they're designers after all. So that was what this one here is kind of showing where we can customize that based on the user roles as well. There's another way to do this though. It doesn't involve all these different these code changes. WordPress VIP has a plugin that is available on GitHub to install that you can use to customize the experience just with a few different options. So it looks like this. There's not too many options in there. That's actually because it's mostly controlled by, again, a configuration file. But you can access it and actually just play with it just with that QR code there if you wanted to try it out. And so this is what sort of the configuration looks like. So again, you're jumping into code, having to change some different things here, define things in a JSON file, which has a specific schema that you have to comply with. And you can expand on that and do things for specific blocks, disabling and controlling what blocks can be nested within other blocks. Nope.
So Jesse, so WordPress, not out of the box, it doesn't allow those configurations like role-based permissions and stuff?
It allows role-based permissions in general for different user accounts. Like you have default roles for editor, author, contributor, admin, subscriber, and network admin. But to actually assign different things to those roles, you have to drop into code most of the time, or get a plugin to do that. So you can do things like changing who can add new posts on the site, for example, based on assigned role. But that would also, again, need a plugin to be able to do that. So the underlying framework is there, but you need a plugin to sort of expose the controls or just use code to do that. But then if you want to customize the editing experience, that's where, again, you need another plugin, another system to do that, or code as well, yeah. Yeah, so this again is just showing the depth that you can go, even to defining which blocks can use which colors through a configuration file in this block governance plugin. So we've been looking at using something like that for a little while, trying to explore how we can do that. And this is really great. This offers us an immense amount of flexibility and control over everything. We wanted something a little bit simpler that gives us a nice UI to apply some things really easy and give us different levels of control and also some different features. So we kind of thought, let's spend a little time and see if we can put together a plugin to give us a nice UI around this and give us some more control. So we've actually been working on that recently. I just wanted to show a couple of quick screenshots of how this is looking right now. We're just sort of still working on it. It's still pretty new. But we're building this plugin that's going to give us some control over what we expose to different roles. You can see here. I don't know if, do I have the, oops. What did I do there? Oh, that's okay. Yeah, we have different roles or different sections for different roles where we can turn off and on different things. So here you can see we have disabled the background color for all blocks, just holistically, because we felt like that's not something that we want to actually use. And here you see we can actually disable a whole bunch of different blocks. Maybe we don't want to expose all these various blocks for this one website, so we can disable those pretty easily here too. And we can do that by user role as well. So we can disable them for the editors, but maybe not for the admins, because admins are, again, maybe trusted a little bit differently.
Is this like, so these blocks, you're just assigning them to roles, or can you assign them to people as well? Like, what if you wanted to create a block only like one or two people? You just assign for roles, right?
Yeah, it's just with roles. That would be something to consider, of course. Throw it out there. For sure.
One thing you could do there with WordPress, you can create anything you want, right? So you could create a new specific role to get super creative.
And just put one person.
Yeah.
But like in the theory of like complexity, that could get super challenging.
No, I agree. Something random.
Yeah.
That'd be practical.
Yeah, and then we also, one of the big things that bugs me is I've said it a couple times, the amount of embeds, or different embed blocks that are in there. When you open that block inserter, I don't want to see all of those. So this is actually one of the big motivating factors for me, was how can we get rid of all of those. So we can just disable all those different embeds, and actually we can go even more and disable some of the different other variations. All those embeds are just different variations on one block, so we can start to disable them all, other variations on other blocks as well. And then lastly, we have a few general settings like those block patterns again, that that's not really relevant for most of our clients. We don't want to be creating those really non-brand compliance sections. So we disable those and a few other little features here and there as well. Why did we decide to create another plugin? That kind of alluded to this as well, but this one we're gonna, we plan to hopefully make it available to everybody on WordPress.org. We wanted to sort of create a simplified set of features that anybody can use those features. So we're kind of targeting in the end a bit of a different audience for this one. We also wanted some additional features, like I said, removing some of those things in the block inserter, the patterns, and a couple of other things as well. And actually, one of our goals is to have just some simple presets. So just like some logical, like just create a more streamlined editor rule, for example, that disables a couple of things. Maybe probably disable the H1, for example, in the content area, because we don't really want more than one H1 generally.
Would that plugin cover like a block pattern? Like we want to make a block pattern and make that really accessible to the world.
That's a great idea. We're not looking at that right now, but as a future feature, yeah, if we have a bunch of block patterns and sort of assigning those specific roles, yeah.
Because I feel like there's so many blocks, and
yeah.
a lot of organizations just don't. I feel like the editors don't want 5 or 6 blocks. They just be like, just give me what they think a thing, right? It's like a block pattern with a bunch of blocks that's tailored to their specific.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like we have a lot of editors that are working on certain sections of the website, and so maybe some of their patterns aren't relevant for them.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
You can tell them. So, some editors are more tech savvy than others.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Bring them in a pattern typically alleviates some of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So in general, we're thinking about this in a little bit of a different way. We still want to do some more work on sort of preparing it. Again, I mentioned the presets that we can configure some things very just basic, one click, do this and that'll be it, rather than a bunch of settings. Some import and export of the settings, and even as we're seeing this as like a step in between. So you might want to have a way to actually export with the schema of the other of the FS governance plugin. Publishing it to WordPress.org. I want to do some visual hints so that the user knows. One of the problems that I've come across many times inheriting websites from other people is that they might not, users might not know that some things have been disabled for them, and I might not even know as a developer that some things have been disabled when I'm working on somebody else's site. So providing some hints for that, and then some network-wide controls as well. It's also a work in progress. We don't have a timeline for anything. We just kind of started playing with this recently. But so just if you want to stay up to date when and if something when something comes out, we'll of course.
Are you going to open source it?
Sorry?
Are you going to open source it?
Absolutely, yeah.
If you have any GitHubs, do you have any GitHubs?
Not yet. Yeah. We actually we did a quick 3-week sprint and just finished it off last week. So. We're gonna see where we'll go from here, but yeah, we'll open it up for sure. So that was all one sort of section there. I want to also talk about sort of who's responsible for the content editor experience. I alluded to this a little bit earlier that I think it's important to have somebody who is actually defined as responsible for this. Without that, nobody's taking responsibility, right? So if you go back to some of these screenshots that I showed earlier with these giant forms and fields and whatnot, I think this is what happens when we leave it up to developers. We like structure. We like to have control over the output and have very rigid themes and whatnot, and that's fine. We have our own thought process, and naturally that's how we think about things. Designers, on the other hand, are a very natural fit for being somebody who's more empathetic to the user's needs and sort of knows about good UX principles and whatnot. But they obviously don't know about the CMS, they don't know its capabilities, they don't know the code side of things. Project managers, project owners, those kinds of roles are also generally great advocates for the users, for the clients, and in our case, and especially when they're creating their user stories and sort of working on all of that, but they also don't have maybe the design or the CMS experience as well. So they're maybe not necessarily the right people either. And then there's the folks that are actually using the editor, using the experience that we're creating. They're also obviously have a stake in all of this. So we have all these different groups of people, but sort of where can that responsibility lie? And actually, I don't actually really know. I think ultimately it doesn't really lie in any one place. I think we can all help. Everybody on this list can really be a really great advocate and a part of that. But that's kind of like counter to what I was saying. I do think that it'd be helpful to have somebody who's responsible for this. As I said, I don't really know who that is. I don't know if we want to suggest like a content editor specialist. We have or accessibility specialist. We have accessibility specialists, people like that. Well timed. We have those roles already where, like, Faraz, one of our front-end developers and designer as well. And so he has that different, understanding of user experience and the front end and everything. But he's also our front-end developer. He's not just an accessibility specialist or just a content editor specialist. I don't necessarily think that we do need a new role. I think it can be maybe closer to that idea, closer to that accessibility specialist in the team. We don't need roles for everything. But maybe something that some people want to specialize in. For example, chose to specialize in accessibility. Maybe some other people, like myself, will feel really passionate about the editing experience and want to specialize in that. But the collaboration, I think, is one of the most important things. Just having everybody working together, because it truly does take a lot of different pieces, I think, to come together. There's no one skill set that can do that thing. But ultimately, I do think that like us as the web, as website builders, professionals in this industry, we're the ones that should be able to help this. Content editors need to remain involved, but we're the ones that ultimately create these experiences. So I have some other follow-up suggestions to talk through. For the designers in the crowd, I think it's important to do user research with our content editors, involve them in the process, see how they're using it, understand their pain points and their needs. You can also request to be involved in building the experience. I think there's a lot that happens when we're creating a website that a designer can have a lot of input on. And in that back end, that's kind of where they're not involved today, I would say. We usually create like a page that has all of our components and everything on it in the CMS. I think it'd be great to have designers creating those pages and have them actually using the thing that they've designed, using their components. I think that would help to understand more how that experience is crafted. For the content editors, people actually using these experiences, I think again providing feedback would be very important. Just knowing that we have some of this flexibility, we can curate this experience, we can make changes, we have a lot of control, but we don't know as the web professionals, we don't know that something's happening, something's not working right unless we get that feedback. And just to advocate for that simplicity, because again, like if it's too complex, that just gets a barrier for a lot of changes on the site. Reviewing the experience for the brand standards, the brand guidelines, we obviously like to know those standards and know what's in there, but we don't always have the best. We're not using it day in and day out like the content editor team is. So, and then finally, I think just requesting demos. We do demo the experience that we're building. We demo the whole CMS, the front end and the back end. So that's a great time when we hear from our content teams about how it's working, or rather what's not working. So we oftentimes will tweak things based on those discussions. So if you're working with a team that's not doing that, then that would be a great suggestion to start requesting those demos and guidelines, documents, videos, any sort of additional training content. Just some last follow-up or some last items. Clearly identifying the responsible person, embracing the modern frameworks, simplifying the interface, user testing, consistency in styles, and training documentation. I think these are all going to go a long way to helping craft these better experiences. A couple of suggestions on maybe what not to do. Using technical jargon, when we're creating these fields or creating the sidebars for our components, if we use too many acronyms, too much jargon, that people aren't going to understand, that this is another barrier to creating a better experience. Overloading the editing screen, we've kind of covered that a little bit. Hard-coded layouts or locking editors out, I think, is always challenging because while I'm sort of advocating for less flexibility, we also have to make sure that there's a certain amount of flexibility. Otherwise, again, it's going to just make for a frustrating experience and might make people maybe do things in a way that wasn't intended. Ignoring performance for admin users, I think that's something that we've come across where if the back end of the website is really slow, again, it leads to frustration, it creates a bad experience, it leads to that poor sentiment of the CMS and outdated content. And then, as I mentioned a couple times, we want to make sure that we have help text and documentation and guidelines and videos and all that kind of stuff to help support the team. So neglecting that again will disincentivize content updates and get back to that what I'm now apparently calling the Thanksgiving problem. So with all that, how to sort of wrap that up, I think it's just important for all of us when we're building new websites to think about the content editing experience too. Think about how we can make that better and really try to focus on it. So that's what I had. As I mentioned, I have all the different code samples that I put in there. This is actually I did a webinar a little while ago now about the same ideas. So it's actually based on that. And you can get them all those are on GitHub. So all the code samples and actually a lot more is available there. What's not on there yet though is any the two plugins that I was mentioning. But those are also on GitHub. I'm happy to share those privately as well. So yeah, I have about 10 minutes for any questions or comments on this or anything. Yes, shoot.
Do you think it's even possible for the communities that are supporting and using Drupal and WordPress and other content management systems to bring these problems to the developers at the core level, that where things are falling short for the content editors? I've never been in a model like this where developers make things for people and the people can't actually use them because they're so convoluted. If things need to be simplified, is it possible to simplify in core and then add or click a button and get the junk back that you're eliminating? Do you think any of these things can be pushed back to the core developers?
That's an interesting flip of the perspective. Because you're right. Most of the time, we put so much in core, and at least I'm thinking from a WordPress perspective, But I do know there's a lot of work, a lot of discussions that happen in WordPress core development, especially around the block editor and everything that's changing there, about not adding too much. Famously, there's a whole discussion around whether or not we should have like breakpoint responsive controls, because that's kind of a different mentality for some people to think about. So I think that they do try to limit what's in there, but to actually like flip that around, at this point I'd say probably not, because we're going down this path already, and that would be a huge like departure from where we're at. So
Exactly, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
yeah. So
Huge departure is what I think is needed, quite frankly, but.
Fair, yeah, absolutely, yeah, a big change, yeah. I think I think maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think that if the community can provide some plugins, extensions, everything to help, then that is an option. I know in WordPress we have the idea of like canonical plugins, and maybe that's the alternative, is to have a canonical plugin that is maybe maintained by the community and is something that can just be like pre-installed on some sites, and has these presets that we're thinking about. So
Yeah, I just think that developers need to better understand the problems that that content editors are encountering with the default install that comes out of either platform, and streamline it in such a way that, okay, I can get started here, and I don't have to have a node edit form. I'm a Drupal developer, so it's a
Okay.
node edit form. I don't have to have that with so many things that I really look to eliminate
Yeah.
in many cases to make my content editing experience more streamlined. Why is it in there in the first place? There should be a way to say, hey, leave it all out, and if you want to have special features that you click a button and put them in there, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But don't overload the user by default, because that's what's happening now. At least in Drupal, I'm not familiar with WordPress, but at least in Drupal, your node edit form is, every field you put in there, one after the other, you can scroll, for a long time before you complete a node, whereas you may not need every single drop down, every single click button, to streamline it with the content editor's needs in mind.
Right. Yeah.
And I would like to see the communities take more responsibility for that. I mean, what you're suggesting here, and for WordPress, certainly makes sense, but look at where the position they put you in. You've got to go in
Yeah.
and undo what's been put into this,
Yeah.
so that you give a content editor a comfortable interface.
Yeah.
Whereas what should happen is the product, the initial core product, should be easier to use for content editors, and then if you want to complicate it, have all the fun you want, but you can turn it on and off at your discretion. And I'll just give you an example. I was working for a major media company with over 100 Drupal subsites. We redesigned the node edit form. We modified it so that removed things that weren't needed and so forth. And then we tested it out on dozens of content editors from the different subsites, and I was invited to the focus group, as were all the other developers in the company. I was the only person that showed up. And the lack of caring for how the product is received by the people who have to use it, whether it's in the Drupal community or from what I'm seeing from you, the WordPress community, is criminal. Because you're working for these people who are the content editors. They are the front line of this, not the people that pay the bills, not the tech people that make the decisions, but it's the content editors that are on the front lines of whether this product works. And if you're sabotaging them by default, then you're not doing your job.
Yeah. It's a hard it's a hard thing to solve. I think just coming up with a defaults that'll work for everybody. So yeah.
Yep. All right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
So I am actually the speaker for the session after this,
Okay.
and if you want to see a use case of what a lot of these principles look like in action and how it actually works out, you can stick around for mine as well.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great.
Spoiler alert, it works out really well.
That's awesome. That's great. That's great to hear. So yeah, you have some very specific examples and whatnot.
Yep.
Great. And so, sorry, I saw a hand go.
Have you had any experience when the client is more they like the big forms more than the either visual builders or layout builder or Gutenberg or?
Absolutely.
And it's in my experience, so it's not only the resistance of change or the thing that they are used to with to work with, but like a different mental model with a couple of our clients that just prefer the clean form to edit the content.
Yeah, and I think that those still the classic example I love to use is events. Events are very structured, very by nature. But I mean an event content type or post type on a site, right? There's going to be a set of fields. There's going to be a
structured
start
content
date.
is no-brainer for me. Even I prefer the forms, but when it comes to page building, I mean we have a couple of clients we are also working on Drupal that just can't stop using paragraphs for some reason.
Yeah. No, and maybe that's great. If somebody really feels good with that, and if the team is a size that there's only a handful of people on there.
Yeah, you mean? What I'm saying is that it basically comes down to, in most of the cases, in some of the cases, it comes down to the mental model of the user and the content editor, and how are they communicating their pain points. Because, for our case, it was just the matter of having some empathy towards the people who are using it. So when we started to make developers communicate more directly to the content editors as an experiment. On the next project, we saw that developers started to, for example, take into account the order of fields that they are putting into a content type, for example. Because even something small like order of fields that the user is filling out, it's still an UX, right? It's still the part of the content editor experience.
Yeah, and that's a great point. The last point is just that I think that's again where doing user testing, having designers, people that are more empathetic to that, involved in that process, I think would help with just the ordering of those fields or the labeling of those fields.
Yeah, because this is not something that affects company income or performance of the company, unless it's media. The media is the one specific point when the time to publish makes a lot of difference. So they worry a lot about the editor experience, well, most of them. But in other cases, it's just an intern who's going to spend 20 minutes more updating the page, and nobody cares.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it'll always change depending on a lot of things, preference, and the teams involved. So,
Thank you.
Any last questions? I have 1 minute left, technically. No? All right. Well, if anyone has any questions or anything wants to discuss more, I'm happy to. I'm been happy to continue talking about this subject for as long as I can. So let me know. Find me anywhere. Thanks.
Thank you.